Hello and welcome to Week in Review with me, Jane Secker. Kevin Maguire and Andrew Pearce are here to look back at the biggest story of the last 7 days. What have been your top stories?
Has to be two women on the shortlist to be our next Prime Minister. Labour Party, eat your heart out.
I think the Chilcot report and absolutely damning on Tony Blair and Iraq.
Indeed, well, more on both of those stories in a second. But first, let's get a taste of what the week was all about. Gunmen opened fire on police officers during a protest in Dallas, Texas, the most officers killed in one incident since 9/11. The shootings happened amid unrest over recent police shootings of black men. Following a second ballot, Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom will go head-to-head to lead the Conservative Party and the country. While it was farewell Farage as the UKIP leader announced he wants his life back. An intervention that went badly wrong. Sir John Chilcot delivered his verdict on the Iraq War, with former Prime Minister Tony Blair attacked by families of the dead.
And there is one terrorist in this world that the world needs to be aware of, and his name's Tony Blair.
Oscar Pistorius was given a 6-year sentence for killing his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp. Fellow sportsman Lionel Messi was handed 21 months in a Spanish court for tax evasion, while the FBI said Hillary Clinton should not face charges over her use of private emails as Secretary of State. NASA scientists celebrated as their Juno spacecraft reached Jupiter. A new meaning for emotional baggage in the finals of the annual wife-carrying competition in Finland. And a Viking thunderclap from Iceland fans as their football team returned home after reaching the quarter-finals in Euro 2016. We're going to be talking about Wales in a short while, but the big news in the last few hours as we record this is that the dreadful shootings in Dallas and the stunned reaction of America to what's happened there.
No, absolutely. You've got police killing black men, and now you have snipers killing police, and it's all part of a very divided America that also is heavily armed. There are too many guns and there's too many divisions, and you've got to take the guns away and you've got to heal the divisions so the police aren't killing black men.
Two terms down with the first black president, would you have expected race relations to be better than they are now in America?
Much better, and I think it's a stain on his presidency. And I know people say there's a logjam, he can't get gun reform through. But
you do get the sense that he has tried his best.
I think he has to spend every day of what remains his presidency talking about gun control. Hillary Clinton has to do the same. I don't think there's any chance with Donald Trump, because it's shameful that last year 13,000, or was it 14,000 people were killed by guns in America. It's insanity.
Right, let's move to politics here and let's talk about bloody difficult women. Theresa May or Andrea Leadsom will soon be the new Conservative leader and Prime Minister. And despite the new blood on the way in, the old guard have called the contest a fiasco. Well, here's former Chancellor Ken Clarke in a candid on-microphone moment talking about his candidates.
I don't think the membership will vote for Gove.
No, they won't.
I remember being in a discussion once about something we should do in somewhere like Syria or Iraq, and he was so wild that I remember exchanging looks with Liam Fox, who was quite much more right-wing than me, but we were exchanging views, and Liam was raising eyebrows. I mean, I think with Michael as Prime Minister, we'd go to war with at least 3 countries at once. He did us all a favour by getting rid of Boris, who just... the idea of Boris as Prime Minister is ridiculous.
And that could have happened.
I don't think either Andrea Leadsom or Boris Johnson actually in favour of leaving the European Union. I don't know very well.
That she said something in this remark a couple of years ago.
Only 3 years ago. She's had a Pauline conversion. Yeah. And she does have experience in the City and the Bank of England, and she's not one of the mindless, tiny band of lunatics who think we can have a sort of glorious economic future outside the single market. So long as she understands that she's not to deliver on some of the extremely stupid things she's been saying.
I think Theresa must have a...
Yeah, I mean, it's Theresa. I agree with what you said. I mean, Theresa's a bloody difficult woman, but you and I work for Margaret Thatcher.
It just gets better every time you watch it, doesn't it? I know.
Fantastic.
And of course, the hashtag bloody difficult woman was trending. There's a lot of people who want it made into a T-shirt.
Those remarks won't do Theresa May any harm at all. In fact, she's rather pleased, and she'll be using that in the campaign, because the last...
It's damning of Leadsom, though.
It was damning of Leadsom, but Mrs Thatcher was a difficult woman, but she was a stunningly successful Prime Minister, the longest-serving Prime Minister of the 20th century. And Theresa May won't make the mistake of trying to be the next Mrs Thatcher. She's got to be Theresa May, but... she's a very strong woman. She's authoritative and serious, and I think she's going to win.
Authoritarian as well as authoritative. But she is the harder candidate for Labour to deal with. They much prefer Leadsom, not least because of a dodgy CV, wanting to bring back fox hunting, her sort of 19th century views on gay people, the fact she wanted to remove the minimum wage and employment rights, maternity rights from some workers. So she'd be a much easier target.
But are the Labour Party in a position to criticise? This is going to be the second female Prime Minister, and again by the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Why aren't the Labour Party bringing forward candidates?
But Jane, you're quite right. It's shameful when Labour presents itself as a party of equality and opportunity,
exactly.
that in 116 years it's never had a woman leader. And every time it's asked the question, it's always found a man. Perhaps the next leader will be a woman, whether it's Angela Eagle or somebody else.
But also, these two women have got there without any artificial aid, and there's been no positive discrimination. They've got there on merit and ability, and they were chosen because the Tory MPs think they're the best for the job. Labour have tried all these measures with all-women shortlist, and they're still nowhere near. I mean, Angela Eagle says she might run against Jeremy Corbyn, but you're
let's talk about Labour in a minute.
Labour's got most of the women MPs in the House of Commons, but it is shameful that somebody like Barbara Castle in the past, or Margaret Beckett, or Harriet Harman, the last two were caretaker leaders, but they were never full leader. Yeah. Well, I think Yvette Cooper would have been a very good leader in 2010.
Well, let's move on to Labour, because we've been talking about them. Has the momentum gone for Corbyn to go? The Labour Party is still in turmoil about whether Jeremy Corbyn can or still remain leader. Let's just have a listen.
I have a huge responsibility. I'm carrying out that responsibility, and I'm carrying on with that responsibility. I want to reach out to all our members, to all our supporters, to all our trade union affiliates, and to my colleagues in Parliament. Come together now.
Will that work?
Well, it did look like a hostage video. You kind of expected it to be holding a newspaper with a date to prove when it was recorded. But no, I mean, he is elected. If the MPs, and they launch their coup, if they want to replace him, they will have to have a formal ballot and beat him politically. But the odds are now, I think, that the members would elect him again because they don't feel he's been given long enough to succeed or fail in his own terms. And Owen Smith and Angela Eagle, who've both been pushed forward as potential challengers, can't decide themselves. And I think
do they need to put up or shut up?
Yeah, they do, because I mean, we've had the image. Sky have been filming Angela Eagle, who was the shadow business secretary, coming out of her house every morning saying, Jeremy doesn't do. I'm going to run. Well, when is she going to run? She must be the slowest runner in the world. It's not. It's
tortoise in the hair, though. It's not always the fastest, is it?
This is a farce. Everybody knows Jeremy Corbyn is useless, except Jeremy Corbyn. He's lost 80% support of the Parliamentary Party, and now we read that the Labour Party in the country has increased by 150 to 200,000 since the referendum, which have been more of these headbanger lefties joining.
You hate democracy, don't you?
Keep Corbyn in the job. No,
you really hate democracy.
I really like
people
democracy,
joining
but I'm
and
telling
voting.
you know, democracy doesn't work if the leader of a party loses the support of his parliamentary party.
I find
it doesn't work.
I find it very hard to see Labour winning a general election with Jeremy Corbyn. I've given them a 10% chance. Maybe that is generous. But because he's elected, you've got to unelect him. You have to beat him. You can't just... I understand the frustration of all those MPs who have to deal with him, and they know his office is chaotic and he can't communicate well with the country and he can't get his message across. And while you might excite a small portion of the country, can you get a big enough, broad enough alliance? All those questions are there, but you have to beat him in an election.
Okay. He was critical, wasn't he, of Tony Blair this week? The Chilcot report was out. 7 years and 2.6 million words inside it. Sir John Chilcot released his findings into the Iraq War. Heavy criticism from him for the former Prime Minister Tony Blair. It was revealed that he told the US he would stand with them whatever, months before the war. Sky's political editor Faisal Islam has this report.
13 years after the invasion of Iraq, a 7-year inquiry, and so much of it a verdict on one man, Tony Blair. And for his anti-war detractors, there was much in Sir John Chilcot's 2.6 million words to agree with.
We have concluded that the UK chose to join the invasion of Iraq before the peaceful options for disarmament had been exhausted.
And Sir John unearthed a memo that seemed to show the former PM committing to President Bush 8 months before war.
On July the 28th, Mr. Blair wrote to President Bush with an assurance that he would be with him whatever.
As the families applauded, it was no whitewash, but Mr. Blair was not accused of lying nor acting illegally. An emotional ex-PM, mostly defiant, but starting with a very specific apology.
The intelligence assessments made at the time of going to war turned out to be wrong. The aftermath turned out to be more hostile, protracted and bloody than ever we imagined. For all of this, I express more sorrow, regret, and apology than you may ever know or can believe.
Mr. Blair's views were not convincing those families of British military veterans.
I've gone back to that time when I learnt that my brother had been killed. And there is one terrorist in this world that the world needs to be aware of, and his name is Tony Blair, the world's worst terrorist.
At the heart of it all, a man ready to apologise for mistakes of planning and process, but adamant that all those years ago he made the only decision a Prime Minister could.
Well, the Chilcot report showed that he hadn't lied, that the intelligence may have misled him, but that he didn't lie.
Yeah, but he exaggerated, and he gave those private commitments to Bush in those love letters, which were the most fascinating bit of the inquiry, including that, I'll be with you, whatever. I think some people will still believe he did lie. They interpreted differently to Chilcot and Blair himself. And this is an indelible stain on Tony Blair and his premiership. He will never be able to cleanse. No. And it overshadows, we'll disagree on this, but Labour did a lot of good things in those 13 years, reviving the NHS, minimum wage, employment rights, peace and all that. But this is what he'll be remembered
for. It also showed as well, shamefully, that he hadn't done enough. He had not exhausted the options where they could have had a peaceful solution here. He didn't use the United Nations. He was hell-bent on going to war, that was the truth. But the other thing, which I think is so awful for the families, we all suspected it, but Chilcot is clear. He sent men and women into combat with ill-prepared equipment, inadequate equipment, and that is unforgivable for the 179 who died and the many more who've lost limbs and suffered injuries.
That's a fair point, isn't it, Kevin? Because that's different from making a wrong political decision. If you are sending, your men and women in there without the protection they need.
No, absolutely. It's almost always the case, though, an army's ready to fight a war at the end of the war rather than at the start of the war. But military commanders, too, have questions to answer over that, because yes, if you're going to send somebody to war and you're going to put them in danger, they should have the very best equipment that's available, and they didn't.
Okay, right, time for our quiz now. Can you tell me why the people of Kidlington have been a little perplexed this week? Oh, they do know. It's tickled all of us. Do you know at home? Find out after the break. Welcome back to Week in Review with me, Jane Secker. I'm joined by Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Andrew Pearce, Consultant Editor of the Daily Mail. Now, before the break, we asked why the quiet Oxfordshire village of Kidlington has been in the news. You both know, don't you?
There's been a stampede of Chinese tourists there, and the locals have been amused why they're there, because, of course, they don't speak English.
Well, we've sent Lisa Dowd to see if she could find out.
An ordinary street in an Oxfordshire village, teeming with tourists from China, taking selfies, posing in gateways, and perhaps a look around a garden or two. Martha and Mum Annie,
they're in the garden over there,
can't understand the attraction.
I would say that we regularly see them 3 times to 4 times a week.
We saw them all in the streets and going into people's front gardens and sitting on their benches.
I know I'm famous and everything, but...
Locals in Kidlington film the visitors, filming them. They even turn up at the vicarage.
They stopped and they began to take photos and they began to pose,
At the garage, a more bog-standard draw.
Our toilet, let's have a look. There's been ladies queuing up to use this toilet, which I'm quite surprised at.
Quite an attraction.
Yes.
Why this unassuming village was picked, we might never know. Their pictures, though, must make interesting viewing back at home.
That's wonderful.
And it doesn't. What that doesn't answer is why. Nobody really knows.
But one theory is they think it's where the Dursley family lived in Harry Potter.
But of course that wasn't. It was a village in Gloucestershire.
Or it's been in Midsummer Murders or something like that.
Possibly.
But why go to see...
It's en route to Bicester Village from London, so they think it might be a stop-off point.
Yeah.
But or that it's just that actually sort of 1970s bungalows are something they don't really see and they think they're fascinating.
I know. Perhaps we should go.
I know, but why not go to Stonehenge or Durham Cathedral?
My favourite line is that apparently one tourist asked somebody if they could have a go at mowing their lawn, and apparently the resident refused.
I'd have said yes.
Oh, they can come round to ours, actually. Yeah.
Right, well, let's move away from Kidlington and back to politics. And we've said goodbye to one person this week. He said he was never a career politician and that with all his political ambitions fulfilled, it was time to go. We are talking, of course, about Nigel Farage, who announced he was stepping down as leader of UKIP, but he hasn't yet given up his salary as an EU MEP.
I came into politics from business because I believed that this nation should be self-governing. I have never been, and I've never wanted to be, a career politician. My aim in being in politics was to get Britain out of the European Union. That is what we voted for in that referendum 2 weeks ago. And that is why I now feel that I've done my bit, that I couldn't possibly achieve more than we managed to get in that referendum. And so I feel it's right that I should now stand aside as leader of UKIP. During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
Sorry for him. What about as journalists? We'd quite like our life back this summer. We're not going to get it, are we?
No chance of that. But I think he's right to go. He's achieved mission accomplished, and he'll stay on as an MEP for 2 years, and so he can keep the government's feet to the fire to make sure that they don't row back on any of the deals to get out of the EU. And he's had a great run.
Come on, he's incredibly successful as a politician who couldn't get elected to Parliament and failed 7 times. But he's going to spend more time down the pub, I imagine.
He's got his aim, hasn't he? He had one aim. He made it very clear. Exactly. He's achieved it.
I would like my country back. I would like back the gentler, kinder, more tolerant country we've left in part because of him. And he's legging it now so he doesn't have to pick up the pieces when Brexit goes badly wrong, because there is no plan. As we're seeing, as people will pay 200 quid more for their holidays this year because of the drop in the pound, you should refund them all.
Isn't there the point, though, that Farage and Boris Johnson should have stayed on to not sort out the mess, but to follow through what they proposed?
Farage is an MEP. They've got no clout, no power. That's one of the reasons we should get out of this ridiculous European Union, because they haven't got any power or authority, and he's got no clout with the government either. And Boris Johnson, well, I don't think he'd have been brilliant on the negotiations, really. Even if he'd become Tory leader, he'd have delegated that to somebody else.
But he is hanging on to his 74 grand a year and 40 grand expenses for another couple of years, isn't he?
We spoke to the actor Christopher Waltz this week on Sky News. This is his reaction to Nigel Farage going.
Of course, the head rat would leave the sinking ship. It's inevitable, you know. They try to dress it up as a heroic exit. No, it's conceding defeat.
Is he playing Tarzan or is he playing Jane?
Dear.
Not a fan. Anyway, right, let's move on to your newspaper choices. Kevin, we've already seen Iceland's clap in our week in a minute, but Wales have also done fantastically well, haven't they? They left in the semis, but who would have thought they'd have got that far?
No, not them, actually. First tournament since 1958. It was brilliant for Wales, but actually it was brilliant for the rest of Britain. And I'm an England fan. We went out abysmally, but Chris Coleman, Gareth Bale and the rest of them, it was great to watch, and their fans were there singing and their good behaviour and just enjoying it. No, and they deserve their victory parade in Cardiff.
I think it's like a fairy tale, wasn't it? Because everybody thought they'd be out first, and of course they go much further than England, and they're great sportsmen, I think.
I loved on Twitter everybody discovering Welsh
roots.
ancestry.
Yes, exactly.
Or I had a friend who once went to Wales. Was the best one I've ever seen.
I have links to Cardiff, so I felt their joy.
Cardiff never boasts of links with you, does it?
Andrew, to you now. The suburbs, they're not as thriving as they once were. The good life life is apparently no more. Why?
Well, this is a report by a think tank, the Smith Institute, and they say that the urban decay we saw in the inner cities is now transferring to the suburbs, where poverty has risen from 20 to 24%. And the Smith Institute is saying unless there's urgent action taken, the suburbs, where old Maguire lives, of course, the burbs, will go the same way as inner cities. I think this is a slightly it feels exaggerated to me, this report, although I don't know, because I've never lived in the burbs.
Yes. I am. No, I'm a suburban man, and I live in a nice leafy part of London. No, I do. But I remember as a kid living on a council estate in South Shields on Tyneside, and we were on the edge there, and there was poverty and deprivation then. Not as bad as there is now, but one of the reasons it's got worse now is because of the decline in employment and decent jobs.
And isn't it also about young people, that actually young people coming, for example, to London just can't afford to live in the city anymore. So now the suburbs are filling up with the people who don't have much money, who used to live in the centres, but are now commuting in from the suburbs.
Yeah, I think that is the big factor. It's property prices in the major city centres.
But all the money's gone into those city centres, isn't it? And people might like to live in an old warehouse and it's all gentrified, and that's great. But got to remember where everybody else is, so no one gets left behind. Well, a lot of people are left behind.
Yeah. Kevin, on to term time holidays now. It's proving quite a money spinner, quite lucrative for a lot of councils.
It is. 90,000 people have now been fined in the last academic year. It's £60. It goes up to 120 if you don't pay within 21 days. And I think the change made in 2013, when actually Michael Gove was Education Secretary, taking away discretion from heads, so you can only now have time out if it's exceptional, is a huge mistake, huge mistake. And you're effectively punishing 90,000 people who are probably otherwise completely law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, and just to say, the reason these parents take their children out for school, sometimes it's because of their own work commitment, but also the holidays are so much
price,
cheaper.
Isn't it, for a lot of people? A £60 fine from school is nothing compared to what you'll be paying extra for the holiday.
And these holiday companies are fleecing families.
They are. Well, they're using the supply and demand of that free market use of love and worship.
Thanks very much for the papers. What about your ups and downs? Andrew, we're starting with you this week. Now, you're sending up. Could this be man's new best friend,
Apparently,
the goat?
According to science, Queen Mary University say they've done a lot of research, and goats can be just as loyal and devoted to the master as dogs.
Or the mistress. Cleverer than sheep, apparently.
Cleverer than sheep, well, I think sheep are quite stupid because of the herd mentality.
But I just find goats eat everything, don't they? You know, whenever you go and you visit goats in a petting zoo, they're always in your pockets, eating your boiled sweets.
My first visit to London Zoo, I got knocked over by a goat.
Oh, well, maybe.
Did you?
Yeah. Shame Andrew's best friend.
Shame it wasn't an elephant.
That's right, so we're sending goats up, but you're sending down this week Chris Evans.
Well, it's all over. He's gone from Top Gear, resigned before he was pushed. He's also lost his Channel 4 show TFI Friday, so a very bad week for Chris Evans. The viewing figures were simply not good enough. The viewers just didn't take to him.
It was a car crash for him, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
But he's very popular on the radio, and TFI was very popular when it was on. Yeah. It's just it's the fit, isn't it? It wasn't the right fit.
And he had no chemistry with his co-presenter, and the BBC said they're not going to replace him.
Okay, so we're sending him down. Kevin, you are sending up. Now, this is an interesting one. It's a robot rectum.
Yes, Imperial College London have had to build their own rectum, and they're going to call it the Andrew because he talks out of his. But nevertheless, they've had to invent it because there's only one person registered to have a finger inserted in their human one to test for prostate.
UK. Yeah. It's a rectal teaching assistant, and as you say, there's only one in the UK, one registered. They're obviously worried what happens if he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Well, he must have a very sore bottom if he's the only one.
I'm glad
apparently this is more versatile. It is very serious because it's about discovering prostate cancer, and it
is
a step forward.
But nevertheless,
from bottoms to bottom feeders, mussels, moule marinaire.
I know, could be history within 85 years because global warming is making the sea very acidic and they won't be able to grow. So if you like them, start eating them now and change the way the world operates, all will be out.
And I didn't realise this, that the acidity affects obviously whether they can cling on to the rocks. But there's a 20% drop-off rate for mussels. Basically 20% don't get to hang on and they just fall on the floor and die. 20%!
As opposed to getting eaten. It's not much of a life either way, is it really?
When they still die. What is it?
Right. We're sending mussels down. Thank you very much. Thank you both for your choices. Don't forget, do send us your nominations using the hashtag WINR. Thank you very much for joining us for our review of the week. We'll be back with much more next week. But for now, it's goodbye from them.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.